Thank you. I will now call meeting of the school committee for December 15th, 2016 to order. The first order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. I'd invite everyone to stand up and do the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. Just for the record, we are being recorded tonight, and if those of you who have mobile devices, would you please silence them now? I want to start off tonight a little out of order tonight, and I'd like to recognize the senior member of the board, Mr. Stan Lippert.
Thank you, Mr. Teresi. I wanted to take this opportunity tonight to announce to the community that I will not be running again for a school committee. I've decided that I've put in my time, made my commitment, and done all the good I feel like I can do, and it's time to turn this job, this slot over to someone else and give them an opportunity to make a contribution and have some of the fun that I've had. So I'm really looking forward to seeing who's going to come next and what they'll be able to do here based on what we've done in the past 9 years. I have to say that I've served with some wonderful people, 4 excellent superintendents, Dr. Jim Marini, Christopher Hoddle, Dr. Kevin Hutchinson, and now you, Dr. Price, and I'm very happy to have had some time with you. It's been a great experience so far, and also some wonderful people on the school committee, all of you here, and Amy, David, Andrew, and especially Brian, but also some of the people I started out with, Christine Allen and Chris Nobley, who are still friends, and I think very highly of. So we started out well, and I'd like to hope that we're finishing well. I also want to especially express some thanks to members of the administration, Greg Gilligan, who I've known a really long time. He taught my son history a long, long time ago. And of course, Jim Mealy, who I'd like to take some credit for having gotten into the district. No one else would probably agree with me, but that's okay. I'm going to take credit anyway, right? It was a 2-4. If Hoddle came, Mealy came, so I said, let's do Hoddle, and he came. So I think, on balance, that was not a bad deal. It was a 2-player trade, and I think we did the best for that. So I'd also like to express my appreciation to our town manager, Andrew Mailer. He's been wonderful to all of us, to our district, to our town. And I've learned a lot from him and have really enjoyed working with him. And I have been especially appreciative of the fact that I've been able to serve on some wonderful committees. A couple of superintendent search committees that gave us Mr. Hoddle and Dr. Price, a school building committee that provided a new gymnasium for Kittredge School, and of course, Mr. Mealy. But it's been a great experience. I've really learned a lot. I've really enjoyed all this time, and I really feel really grateful to have had this opportunity. So I just wanted to let everybody know I appreciate everything, but I think it's time for me to leave while I can still say, hey, it was all working when I left. You know, so I appreciate it all. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Oh, no. Sit down. No. Yeah. It's a once-in-a-lifetime experience, right?
Oh, we're still the end of the season.
Yeah.
Well, I wouldn't say it's a once-in-a-lifetime experience. I was thinking that yourself and Mr. Gross, who's also decided not to run for office again, would say a few words, and we'd recognize you appropriately in March at your last meeting. But I guess on behalf of the board, I would say thank you for your service. You've done a lot for the town and been a real asset to this board. Okay, so moving along to our agenda, the next item is public comment on it. I know we don't have a lot of people in the public tonight. I would just say that if people want to comment about the main portion of the meeting, the feasibility study in the classroom, elementary classrooms study, if we could just hold that comment until we take it up at the agenda. I'm actually looking at you, Helen, if you were going to speak about that issue.
I'm not.
Okay, good.
Are we allowed to have public comment mid-meeting this time?
I'm just changing things up because I think last week what we did was, or 2 weeks ago I should say, people had specific questions, and we've had invited the architect back here, and I thought it might be more appropriate at that time. But if people have other things they want to public comment on, feel free to come to the microphone now.
I just really I want to thank Mr. Gross and Mr. Lambert for their many years of service and how much I've learned just watching what's going on. I enjoy this as a spectator sport and appreciate your playership.
That was Helen Picard, by the way, for those keeping track. Okay, so next order of business is the student report. Courtney and Cole are here. Thanks for braving the cold weather tonight and joining us.
No problem. So there's a lot of things going on in the school, trying to cram everything in before break. Relay for Life, there's a committee of students, including myself, who are organizing it, and right now we're pushing people to donate and run or start a team and join a team to participate in Relay for Life, which is coming up in March, but you got to sign up now or sometime close to now. So we're pushing that. And then also there was a DECA fundraiser last night at Chipotle to raise money for that program. And as well as tomorrow there is a fundraiser for the Drama Guild at Acting Out in Lawrence. And it's a Charlie Brown Christmas presentation for a fundraiser for them. And they also have a play coming up, Grease, in the beginning of February. And they're trying to get more kids involved, especially actors, but I think actresses as well. And I think that's pretty much it.
Adding on to the Drama Guild scheme, they're also looking for a teacher advisor still, but they're doing great on their own. They've made $100 off of selling 75-cent pins for a week, and they also made $1,000 on their Shorts Fest. The Pre-Health Club they had a fundraiser where we would give pins away and a wristlet, support wristlet, and we came out to about $520, and it's going to be donated to the Dana-Farber Institute of Cancer. Also, we have decorated these hand sanitizers in the sport of the holidays, and we put it around the school in like main office, library, and lunch cafeteria places. So that's pretty much it.
Any questions for Courtney or Cole? No? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Have
you.
a good one,
Thank you
guys.
both. Thank you. Okay, moving on to the consent agenda. The first item of business is approval of minutes. Do I hear a motion for the approval of the December 1st minutes?
Approve as presented in the packet. The second?
Motion made by Mr. Gross, seconded by Mr. McDevitt to accept the minutes as they appear in your packet. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The next order of business is to accept a donation from Best Buddies to the North Andover Middle School. Dr. Price, do you want to touch on this really quickly?
Yeah, so as many of you know, there was a very successful Wrestle Olympics once again, run by one of our amazing students, Jack Perry, right? So it's pretty incredible, but they made a bunch of money, and the group, Best Buddies at North Andover, actually wants to donate $2,000 to NAMS to create a little Best Buddies. So how cool is that? That like one group of kids is donating to another group of kids to create an organization for the middle school that the high school has. I mean, in my humble opinion, doesn't get much better than that.
That's great.
So we have to make a motion to accept the donation
Please.
from the Best Buddies of the high school to the NAMS
Please.
Buddies program.
Motion made by Ms. Mabley,
Second?
seconded by Mr. Limpet.
Just a quick question.
Sure, discussion.
How will the funds be spent?
So it's to basically, what they do in these situations is do different activities together between the buddies, and so we support those activities, food, transportation, that kind of stuff. Is that correct?
Yes, I was just going to add that the little buddies have already started meeting with their buddies, and they've already done some activities of cooking exactly, doing some decorating. So I had the pleasure of being able to join them and watch the opportunity. They spent the day together, and they just had a really terrific time. So it's already on the roll.
That's great.
It
That's
is.
So motion made by Ms. Mabley, seconded by Mr. Limpet. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Unanimous vote as well. Okay, quick chairs report. First, I was fortunate to go to the North Andover Middle School on Sunday to watch the 21st Century Christmas Carol put on by the middle schoolers there, directed by Debbie Rafali and Melissa Downey. It was very good. My kids enjoyed it. Great to see Cole reminded me of that when he was talking about the acting out. It's really good to see the kids invested in something like that. So I also want to mention in my chair's report that myself and Ms. McDevitt have begun representing the school committee in negotiations with the teachers union. We had a 8-hour orientation yesterday. On interest-based bargaining. So it's just the first step in a long process. I think we hope to have something resolved sometime this spring, but I feel confident that we're going to reach a fair contract with the teachers, and obviously we'll bring it to the board at the appropriate time. We do have another meeting scheduled for early January as it is, and we'll be working diligently, probably on an every other week basis going forward. So feel free to, do you want to add to that, Mr. McDevitt?
I would just say, last negotiation with the teacher's contract, we also did in the interest-based bargaining concept, which is also called or referred to as IBB. Unlike traditional negotiations where it's kind of, two sides kind of sitting against a wall and really kind of proposing one thing versus another, this is extremely collaborative. We literally sat around the tables in a circle and just kind of talking about what it is and looking for the resolution, and kind of it makes everything kind of more, everybody's opinion has an opinion, the ability to kind of speak. In traditional negotiations, it's really only the lawyers who are going back and forth. Last year, or last contract, I thought was very successful. There was a lot of really old language that hadn't been cleaned up in probably 20, 30, 40 years, and kind of conflicted a little bit with each other. So a lot of that has been done, and so I look forward to this process as well. But.
And obviously, we're joined by Dr. Price and all 3 assistant superintendents and members of the high school, middle school, and elementary schools as well. So it's going to be a good process going forward. I look forward to it. And lastly, I just want to remind the committee that tomorrow morning at 7:30 to 9:30 a.m. at the North Andover Senior Center, the Selectmen's Holiday Breakfast. I know Selectman DiCollegiero is here with us today. Shouldn't you be preparing something at home?
I was told that they cracked 40 dozen eggs today at City Town Hall.
Oh, really? Were people throwing them at Town Hall? Or?
Michael Shell's in there, so.
I, for one, have been to the event several times, and it's a great take if folks can make it. That'll be from my report. Madam Superintendent, do you want to talk
Yes,
about?
superintendent's report is actually pretty quick. I just wanted to inform the school committee, because Sarah Durkin wanted me to inform you that they're actually staying an extra day in Atlantic City, which is a Saturday, but she is a letter of the law kind of person and wanted to make sure you knew that. So I'm informing you of that. And other than that, I was very thankful to the Department of Public Works to get the schools open on Monday and being able to have a delay and get us in. So, it's amazing. Those guys, we start talking at 3:45, 4 in the morning, and they've already been up for hours. I mean, it's some of the most unsung heroes of North Andover are the guys out on the plows in the mornings. And, getting a call from the superintendent, what are we doing? How are we going? What's going on? It's never really fun. And I just so appreciate that they're with us.
Okay.
And we're starting our buses early with a mechanic present, and our schools will be warm, and we look forward to welcoming kids tomorrow morning.
The engines.
The engines early. Pick up at the usual time. We're starting the engines early. Jim has actually got the building's heat scheduled to come on early, so we're preparing for a full day of school tomorrow.
Let's hope so. Let's hope so. Okay, going to old business. We're going to talk about the feasibility study report by the KBA architects. So first I'm going to invite Kevin Buckley, who was with us 2 weeks ago presenting, to join us up here. And I had said previously that if folks wanted to make a comments about this specific, the specific proposals that they outlined 2 weeks ago, that this would be the time to talk about it, because if there were questions, I felt it was appropriate that Kevin was here to answer those questions. So if anyone in the audience would like to talk, comment, ask questions about this process, please come forward, state your name and your address. Any takers in the audience?
Don't be shy.
Don't be shy. Okay, well, if you change your mind, we're going to talk about this for a little bit. So at this point, I'd be willing to hear a motion, and we can have a discussion about that motion or other things that are in the report. So,
Mr. Teresi, I move that the North Andover School Committee accept the recommendation of option 3A from KBA architects from their North Andover Elementary School classroom study, and that we further ask the town manager to pursue and advocate for this option with the Board of Selectmen, the Finance Committee, and ultimately the town at town meeting.
I'll second that.
Motion made by Mr. Limpert, second by Mr. Gross. Discussion before we vote.
Yes.
Discussion. Mr. Gross, you can do this, sure.
Mr. Buckley, nice to meet you in person.
Yes, I know.
I apologize for the technical challenges. There were a couple of questions that I did have related to this proposal and the Brad Street siding proposal. The one on the Brad Street siding proposal, I was a little curious how we intend to service.
ECC,
DCC?
No, not the ECC, the proposal of extending at the Brad Street directly.
Franklin.
No, I'm sorry, at, excuse me, Kittredge, forgive me. Literally just got off the plane, so pardon me. The Kittredge proposal, where we were building behind the kitchen, extending the kitchen as well.
We were extending the cafeteria.
Yes.
As part of the project.
Correct. So-
Could we advance to the to the Kittredge proposal?
So the Kittredge is in option one.
I understand.
Okay.
I understand. So as we get to the slide, the two questions I had was, one, I wasn't quite sure if the grading was going to be able to house that. This is Sargent.
No, this is.
That's
Kittredge
Kittredge.
here.
Kittredge right now.
I don't see one that had that.
Yeah, so,
These are the,
yes, that one. Exactly. So the two questions I had on that before we dismiss it, because I think we have a motion to do 3A. The grading, I don't know if that was going to put these classrooms at a higher altitude than we expect. And the other question was, how would we service the kitchen? Because we would be creating a landlocked environment behind the building then.
see, this is the,
That's the current layout.
Right.
Hold on, let's get to the new one. So the new one is on
So,
tab.
Mr. Gross, you're primarily referring to option 2, I think, in which the bulk of the work was to occur at Franklin.
It's
And
on
then-
Kittredge.
and then- Yes,
Kittredge.
but then, and then
Yeah.
the Phase 2 portion of that was some additional work at Kittredge.
Correct.
To clean up in the second phase, as we have in most options, or in all the options.
No, keep going.
And if you, yeah, so.
That's Atkinson.
Yeah, that's not it.
Keep going, it's coming.
It's
You find
coming.
that.
It's coming. There you go.
There it is, boom.
Yeah.
It's
Exactly.
it's
So-
this one right
Yeah,
here.
he's got it.
Right, so, and while this still may be in the future, I just want to understand how the grading would support this, given that I think the buildings would, or the extensions would be, maybe 12 feet above street level.
Yeah, but at the schematic design, or even the feasibility study stage that these are at, the entrance to that portion where you see it attached to the building itself, the paving there is at grade, so you have a level walkthrough. Whether or not some additional site excavation needs to occur so that the back end of that addition may have to sit somewhat below grade, but it would still, I don't think it slopes up in what we can see from our initial
Okay.
observations. It doesn't slope up to impact the window aspect of it. So unlike a classroom on a flat site where from the foundation up might be fully exposed, this may be covered by grading
Okay.
from the middle up.
All right, and then how would you service the kitchen in this case?
I think we're always trying to maintain a 15 to 20-foot access point, and as you can see at the backside of the gym between the classrooms and the gymnasium, we never get less than 15. A truck, unless it has a significant turning aspect, would have some issues. It depends. If box trucks could probably get in and out of there easy. If it was a semi delivering to that site, then it would be something we'd have to look at further. It might just mean that the addition gets pulled back a little bit further, and you have a connecting link where maybe you put some sort of receiving dock
Okay.
at that point.
Okay, thank you. And then with regards to the 3A proposal in front of us, can you comment on what you envision as the traffic flow and the parking, given that I think that those are the two biggest concerns I have with that particular proposal, given Now we would have, you know, how many elementary and 300 and some odd moms and dads or buses coming
Plus.
to pick up?
Right. So some addition, obviously, there's work that's being planned now for the fields, and the traffic flow as it exists now, the roadway goes straight in front of the existing ECC and only gives you a right turn out of there. As you can see, with the new addition of the additional classrooms out in front of that piece, there's some modification to that. It's much wider than was there currently. I think further study would have to occur whether or not you could then effectively have a left turn as well as a right turn, but the right turn out of that site would work the same way as it works now. The driveway just gets modified out in front of the new addition portion. And some additional work would have to occur down towards the middle school as well. So I think the finalization of the driveways and the traffic flow would be more finite as you got through schematic and then design development and such. But I think from the initial standpoint, we have the space and the turning radii so that we could make it work for both bus traffic and parent drop-off.
I'm just not sure there's even enough room to queue the buses at this point on this proposal, but.
Well, the queue is not much different than it is now. We're having the connecting link up so that you're entering very close to where the existing building is entered now. And if you look at I think the larger plan shows it, and it just pulls the doorway down, so it made a connecting link, and you could go in either direction once at that point. Right now, the buses would queue further back towards the Atkinson building in that run right there.
So the reality, Brian, is that if you look at the proposal, we've put $300,000 in site work for 3A because we know that the site work is going to be a huge part of this. On top of that, Ms. Mabley is working with the middle school fields improvement committee. And so, you know, the whole idea here is there's no doubt that if this is the idea, the next major project is to figure out the traffic, because the reality of the situation is the traffic doesn't work very well right now either.
Right.
So how do we take this as an opportunity to think about all ways to get people in and out of this site? Because right now, I mean, I do bus duty with, and drop-off duty with Mary Lou all the time, and, you know, people are waiting. And the lineup, I mean, they have it down to a science, but it's by no means ideal.
Yeah, I agree, and there's another concern with the fields work being done in parallel without that issue being resolved. I think that.
Yeah, but the idea here is that I actually would say that I think that there's synergy to resolve it together.
Yeah,
Because
there's
if
no
you look-
question the thought processes should be melded so that one knows what the other is planning, so that you could go forward with that at the same time.
And that's why Amy's on the committee. I
Yeah.
mean, I want to
I was
let,
going to say, we've already had 2 meetings in the last 10 days. They're fully aware of this drawing. They had it on their schematic as this addition being put behind the ECC. So that was a surprise until I showed them this. And so I made it very clear that there are concerns of traffic because right now the middle school drop-off is sent right out by the ECC, and that is not great. And the other complaint I've heard from the middle school staff is that the ECC pickup people drive through the wrong side of the middle school where the kids are outside playing basketball and stuff at lunchtime, and cars are going through them, they're absolutely not supposed to. So there are issues today in the area. So this is my #1 concern as well. So the Fields Committee is aware of this. It sounds like you're aware of this. But we'd really need to see a really good plan before. I mean, that's to me, the only real major concern is this traffic situation.
And as the superintendent pointed out, there's money in this
Right.
proposal to address it.
Okay. With that said, though, I mean, the support for the 3A plan, I mean, my kids both did the Brad Street. It was a great opportunity for the group to be together for the kindergarten years. As they continued to go to their own community schools, they at least knew students from other schools, and when they came back to middle school, they actually
Remember.
they rekindled the relationships that they remember in kindergarten. So I think that is really a very good plan. I would love to see us come up with a solution that doesn't sacrifice traffic flow for Fields. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gross. Mr. McDevitt?
So again, I mean, I'm probably more in favor of 3. or 3A. My concerns really are about the traffic and really understanding that, and I think it's the same concerns that Mrs. Mabley has as well. The other concern that I have, and I totally get and understand, the dramatic impact that this has for all of our schools in terms of freeing up space. I would just be a little bit concerned about what we do from a busing perspective, because I think you're always worried about kindergartners kind of, especially at that age, putting them on a bus and having them go, for 40 minutes or so. I mean, I myself have been very lucky. My kids are like 2 stops away from going to school, but I can't imagine putting a child on the bus an hour before school. That's my challenge that I wrestle with, is how do we do the buses to make sure that they go there in a timely way that these students are not.
Do you want to address that, Mr. Mealy? I mean, you've thought about that.
Yeah, we have, and we've looked at how it was done when Bradstreet was the kindergarten, and there wasn't a change in the number of buses. It was just a rerouting to move away from that. So we wouldn't anticipate additional costs, and certainly managing it the same way we did when it was Bradstreet. So we're running a few different models, but we don't anticipate it being an additional cost, and the times we're always managing those so that we minimize the ride time for any student.
When we did Bradstreet, it was still half-day kindergarten, so we were actually doing multiple buses in the middle of the day. So, I mean, we've looked at this, we've talked about this. The one thing I would say is, it's full-day kindergarten, but the one thing about having a kindergarten-only building is we're actually not under the laws of 990. So if we had to go 5 minutes one direction or the other, because kindergarten is not compulsory in the state of Massachusetts, so much of our busing, the minutes, is so that we get to the 990 minutes, which is required 1st through 12th. So if we needed to move things 5 minutes here or there, it's still a full day, but we're not wedded to the 990.
Okay. That's just my only
Yep, we understand.
negative that I think I've heard from people about, having my child be there.
Yep.
No?
Ms. Mabley?
Yes, so my number one thing is the traffic as well. And actually, on the bus topic, I understand, so when kids went to Bradstreet, was every child in the district in kindergarten picked up by the bus, even if they lived up the street? Or just the typical bus rules?
It's typical bus.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. I'm just curious.
This is just the morning we're talking
Right.
about.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. And so the idea would be they would get bused in the morning and they take the bus home. And they'd be riding with all the grades, K to 5, or?
We don't know.
We don't know yet,
No.
but that would be what would be looked at, okay.
Right.
So the traffic thing is the biggest concern to me. And again, I think looking at just this flow is not enough. I think you have to look at the middle school, how it all flows together. Do you come in by Atkinson to drop off here? Like, how do you actually get in here? That kind of stuff. And then one other question was the Franklin Gym, right? So the parts of the project that would be in the second stage. If we were to just do the Franklin Gym, does that trigger the
sprinklers and
yes,
the
sprinkler and
architectural?
AAB compliance, just the gym itself, or is it the gym and the classrooms?
Well, I'd have to go back and look at
Okay.
that, because the thresholds are the 30% thresholds.
Right.
But the problem is with public buildings not assessed at their level. We have the numbers in here.
Okay.
We have to go back and see what would just that project take.
Okay.
In all likelihood, it would be a trigger. Ultimately, local jurisdiction takes full preference, and if the local fire departments have been looking for a long time to get sprinklers implemented,
That would be.
and then you're doing a project that maybe it's a few dollars less than the threshold, they're still going to say, with the amount of disruption and the contractors and the construction and the money you're spending, let's take it to the right step and get the sprinklers installed.
Well,
Okay.
as we found out from the Kittredge modular project.
That alone did it, right?
Any square footage addition
Does it?
triggers the sprinklers.
Okay.
Not necessarily
The
the
MAB,
compliance.
but-
Right.
Right.
Because I would love to find a way to do 3A and the Franklin Gym.
Year one.
Right.
I do, just in response, I don't disagree with that at all, but I do know that, I've said very publicly, and that at least from my perspective, the first school on the next part is Franklin.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying that those portables are great, but it seems like the gym is the most
Yeah, the gym
egregious
is
problem.
very problematic.
So I was trying to find a creative way to do that first.
Yeah.
While we do.
Because the
what we
existing
do.
gym itself is so much smaller than a regular-sized gymnasium. Yeah.
With especially that population size too. So, and I can talk more about the Fields Improvement Committee, but the discussion has been to really make sure that we mesh together this project, what they're doing, and also make sure we keep those fields that the high school needs and all that. Same, we can't lose the two fields.
Right, and even if that field project that we were made aware of first day wasn't ongoing, one of the first things we ask about in the early stages of any project is what is anticipated, what other town improvements are being planned, so
Good.
that you're thinking about all of that, even if it's
Right.
somewhat off-site, it could have impact on the project.
Right, okay. And they, I'm asking because they did ask, because they had given the drawing, was there any reason why we did not consider putting the addition behind or alongside or something with the ECC? Or
There's some wetland
That was what
issues
they thought.
behind the building, yeah. So this looked to be the most logical. We also think from a standpoint of modular classrooms coming in,
Easier.
you want to take advantage of them. They're going to be coming in on trailers. This is the space open up front, so one of the first things you do is you would make all those site improvements. You'd widen all those driveways.
Yeah.
You'd make everything accessible. You wouldn't put down your final paving or your sidewalks or your curbing, because a lot of that would be disrupted from the activity.
Sure.
But that would open everything up. You'd figure out your intermediate traffic patterns for the existing building to operate while this was going on. And then this would give you an opportunity to drop those out front for less cost, and then, and clean up quicker
Right.
than trying to go behind the building.
Fair enough, thank you. That's it.
Mr. Lippert?
I guess the siting is still my primary concern here. I think that if we go ahead and approve this option, I think before we get to the final design, I'd really like to explore other siting options here, particularly putting the kindergarten building in back of the ECC. I think that would solve a lot of the issues that we're talking about now, traffic and other things, and make it easier now. So if we have to go, camp out in the Concom for a while and, talk to them about stuff, maybe that's what we have to do and sort of figure that out. It offers some other challenges, I would readily admit, but I think we need to explore that as another idea just before we lock this down. So that's all I would say about this.
Is it easy to figure out, Ken, how much more it would cost if we put it behind there?
Oh, it would definitely be more of cost.
We recognize that, but
yeah,
how would we get a handle on how much more it would cost?
It would take a bit. You first have to identify the wetlands. You'd have to have those meetings with COMCOM. You have to come up with a siting that would work. We talked about the possibility of doing that, and then what it impacts the existing exterior playground that's at the ECC now. It would probably eliminate that, and then it would move the entrance closer to that end of the building, and by doing that, it would probably impact on rooms inside the existing ECC now, which are not being affected by the current configuration, because all we're doing is we're marrying up to the building with a connecting link and creating a new vestibule. So basically, the exterior doors of the ECC become an interior doorway into it. The beauty of that is that during the construction process, there's complete separation, and so you're not impacting on those kids. Yes, there's going to be noise and dust and the typical activities, but the building itself is completely segregated from any internal activities, which would not happen if you were to build behind it. I think the connecting portion. So it would be more costly. We don't know what that cost would be. When we thought about putting it out back, it looked like the only place it could really go away from the wetlands would be landing on the existing playground of the Atkinson now, and there's already plans to improve upon that as well. So that's a tough situation, because now the Atkinson students don't have any direct, if you were to put it there, the Atkinson students wouldn't have any direct access to a playground. Yeah, you could talk about having something integral with the playfields across the street, but now you're crossing roadways to get to it. It's not directly behind the gymnasium, so there's a lot of factors that would impact on it.
I just think this board, if we would go forward with this option, by the time we get to town meeting in May, we have to have a really good answer to this travel.
Certainly it's directed. We bring in our cost estimator, we bring in the civil engineer, would meet with the Concom, would go through that. I think I can just tell you first blush that we did look at it, and there's no doubt, even if the land was directly available, because of the access to that point, as I had just described to Ms. Mabley, that it would be more expensive. What that expense would be yet, we don't know. But we can certainly proceed along those lines, that we would look at it and try to, be more accurate and pinpoint those numbers.
One other question, Mr.
Sure, Mr. Gross.
So, Mr. Buckley, is it possible to do a two-story modular? Has that been explored, just to reduce the overall footprint of the site?
We try to keep everything on a single level because typically it's going to be less costly. It's easier to work. Granted, you reduce your footprint, but now you have to strengthen the foundation and the first level in order to put the second floor on. Now you're adding staircases at both ends. You're adding an elevator, so the cost goes up for a two-story addition. Obviously, it's always thought about being the easy way out, but in most cases it's not, and it makes it more cumbersome to try to deal with the small children's population age group on two levels versus one.
Thank you. Dr. Price, do you want to touch on
Yes.
the main motivation, obviously, for this project is to reduce class size. So I think Dr. Price wanted to touch on that, and maybe also touch on the letter we received from the town manager.
Yeah, I think I had a number of questions. I think one of the first ones is, a number of folks have asked me about Brad Street, and I know we can't go back and change Brad Street, but I did some analysis today. Ms. Zagari did I just thought some things to remind people of that. So, number of different minutes, but the few comments that are important is at the time in 2008, the cost for renovating Brad Street was estimated to be $7.15 million. So I think it's important that the taxpayers in North Andover know that this is actually a cheaper option. Less expensive. Wow, I apologize. Less expensive option 8 years later. So I think that's important to know. And the other thing that's important on that is that the total construction area, if you renovated Brad Street, was 20,000 square feet, 20,211 classrooms, and our proposal is actually 23,516 classrooms. So it is a less expensive option and a more classroom option. And I think it's important because a number of folks have asked me, well, why didn't we just keep Brad Street? And I think it's important to say that from a purely economic standpoint, it would have been more expensive to renovate Brad Street, and we would have gotten fewer classrooms out of it. So I think that's just important.
And that's 2008 numbers as well.
Yes. Yeah.
And there's a consistent 3 to 5% increase just in escalation alone, and construction values have gone up so much in the last few years.
And that was Danisco Design Partners, so that was an outside. So I just thought that was important because I've been asked that question. Mr. Mealy, do you mind bringing up the class size averages? So one of the things, yes, if you look, if you go back to the agenda. If you go back to the agenda. So one of the things that I've handed to you, and Mr. Mealy will bring up, is, as you know, I just did some analysis that I thought might be helpful. If you look at the blue lines here, you'll see that it's class size average by grade currently. So you can see that last year we had a fewer kids come to kindergarten than we have had traditionally. So our first grade classrooms are our lowest right now in the district on average. Now, every classroom is different based on where they're at. But if you look at the blue line, our current average is 23.2 in 0 through 5. That number is jumping up. It's now up to 23.8 because we've had more kids come. But when we did this analysis, and you can see that's our class sizes across the grade on average. If we had the kindergarten complex and we filled those classrooms, it would actually be the red line. And I actually think that's important to see, that it's a significant difference that would be made in terms of class sizes. I made some decisions about where to put classrooms just based on numbers. Principals might make different decisions, but this is filling back the 15 classrooms. So I just think it's important to see. And then on the back is something we've talked about for a while, which is what percent of our classes are over our class size goals. So, our class size goals are 18 to 22, 23 to 25 for 18 to 22, 20, nothing bigger than 22 up to second grade, nothing bigger than 25, third, fourth, and fifth. Currently, our classes, 43.3% of our classrooms are over our class size guidelines right now, this moment in North Andover as of today. If we had these additional classrooms, we would have 4.7% of our classrooms above the class size goals. That would actually be 9 classrooms across the district that would be below. So I think it's important, I just felt it was important to kind of see, like, well, what are we talking about? I mean, this isn't a small change, this is a significant change, is what I thought would be important.
Interesting.
And then the last thing is, you all received a letter from Mr. Mailer. You had asked me last time to discuss with him the possibilities. And his letter, as you saw, and we're happy to discuss it, and he knows we're discussing it publicly tonight, he also sent it to the Board of Selectmen. For all intents and purposes, said that in terms of his recommendation was 3A. He is supportive of 3A. His current look at the finances of the town is that he believes he can support 3A both in terms of Part 1 and in terms of Part 2 as part of the facilities master plan within the existing debt structure and operational budget of the town, and in that it would not require a debt exclusion override. He also commented the other options he believed would require a debt exclusion. So I hope that was helpful in response to your letter.
Thank you, Dr. Price. With that, I do want to recognize Selectman DiCollegiero again, who has been a very big champion of this project, and thank him, the board, and the town manager for their participation with this process going forward. My conversations with the members here, obviously this is not a perfect plan. We know it's not the perfect plan. But in my estimation, it is the most feasible and efficient way to meet our class reduction goals, and to do it in a way that doesn't require an override, which I think is really important, because going forward, a lot of the feedback that I've received from you members, but also the public, is, well, what's next? What's next for us? And obviously, I think people have concerns about what's going on at the middle school right now, and I think as soon as we approve this, we stay on top of the traffic issue at the new kindergarten complex, that we need to turn our focus to how we address the middle school. And I'm making that commitment to the public and to you folks that is not going to go by the wayside. We're going to focus on that. So I would say one more time, any public comment on the, please come forward and just sit back phone and introduce yourself, and please.
Helen Pickard, 447 Waverly Road. I have 2 questions. One is, does the current play space that's available behind the ECC and with Atkinson School, is that sufficient for another 16 classrooms to be added to that play space outdoors?
No.
And the second question I would have is, if we are talking about expanding NAMS at some point, is that being taken into consideration by the field study folks?
So I'll do the first one, and if you want, I'm looking at you, Miss Mabley. So, so the first one is, I'm very concerned. I met with the kindergarten teachers and the ECC teachers over the last week and a half. I invited them to come and meet with me, and many of them took me up on that offer. And one of the concerns I heard from them was, how about the playground space? The current ECC space is not going to work for 16 kindergarten classrooms. So one of the things that we're already starting to talk about, spoke with Mr. Mailer, is what do we do about that? And as you know, CPA funds have been used to support playgrounds in a really thoughtful way. And Thompson is on the list, Atkinson is on the list, but not quite now. So how do we think about maybe thinking about Atkinson, maybe putting them together? Could we do something jointly? Could we do something with the the field space, this play space? We're already starting to talk about that, and we will come up with a proposal, if this is approved, pretty quickly, about how we approach that. And I think it would be, whether we bring it into the project, whether we go to the CPA for the funding, whether we go jointly with the Fields Committee for the funding, the idea here is we're going to need to think critically about a playground space for these kids. And can we do something in combination with Atkinson? So that would be kind of a very quick step for us to think about quickly. And we're starting those conversations. We started them this week.
And so for the Fields Improvement Group, I certainly can't say what we're doing at the middle school because we have no idea, but I've said that we need to do something in that area. trying to protect the little bubble around it till something is sorted out. But I can say that this is, from the 2 meetings I've had with these people, their interest is to make the best possible recreation space for everybody in town, understanding that the middle school needs some kind of recess space. They do gym up on those fields. The high school needs both those fields for multiple sports. And with the new, should we go with 3A, already talking about how can we help, putting anywhere from an outdoor classroom to playground space, or what can we do that they can also take advantage of during the school day. And so it's very early stages. I think at town meeting, they're only going for the money to actually get the design taken care of. But there are going to be meetings with all these different interest groups about who would be using this space to help figure out what is the best solution. And they're really interested in doing the best thing for everybody, including the schools.
And I can say pretty quickly, if we are going to move, we are already in conversations about if we were going to do something in the middle school, where would it be situated? No idea what it would be, but we will have that answer pretty quickly. So at least we can kind of put a placeholder there, not to say that that's what we're going to do, not to say exactly what we're going to do. But I did walk Kevin through the building a few weeks ago. He and I are in conversations about that. In the next month or two, we will have a sense of where would make the most sense to put something, and we will work really collaboratively to protect that space.
Yeah, these are definitely legitimate concerns, but they're not unsolvable problems, I would say, and I'm very confident that Ms. Mably is going to represent the school committee in our interest with that committee going forward.
That said, should we expect by March to have a place-based plan and a traffic plan presented as an update to 3A?
I don't think you'll have a place-based plan. I mean, I understand that the desire for that. I think it's just going to take some time. I mean, it's part of this is figuring out. There's a lot of moving parts with the place-based.
I agree, and my concern is we're going to be going to town meeting with what we think is the budget, with a lot of unknowns, and that I'm a little uncomfortable with. I would prefer to see that we accelerate our investigations, a traffic impact report.
Traffic, definitely. I'm just saying, I don't think we can have a commitment on the play space.
My concern is they are so interconnected, I don't think we can't have a commitment, or at least a plan to move forward.
And the number one thing we talked about in this Fields Committee was, even before this project, was just traffic.
Yeah.
In that group as well. It's a very big topic.
I agree, and I think by town meeting, we really need to have that packaged. And I appreciate they're a little out of sync, but again, these are so interdependent. I just don't know how we can move forward with high confidence in a budget for, the kindergarten development and traffic mitigation and uncertainty on the play space, how that impacts the middle school.
So, I mean, I would push on the play space in that this town has come up with a way to handle outdoor playgrounds through the CPA. So we're not necessarily talking about the same budget.
I hear that, and I appreciate that. The concern is that we may find that we no longer have a road that communicates between Atkinson and ECC, and that's where the play space goes.
Yeah, we might have a space for the play space, but exactly how we're going to fund it and exactly what we're going to do, I don't think we'll have an answer by March. We probably will by May.
Mr. Limpert?
Let me just add to the traffic study, is the parking component, which I'm very concerned about too, because now we're going to have 16 more teachers.
More than that, because of,
And staff.
AIDS. Yeah.
And we also have a projection for more teachers at Atkinson at some point.
Yep.
Right? So, and.
Well, no more teachers at Atkins, because remember, we're losing the kindergarten teachers.
We're moving them.
We're moving them.
We're losing them from Atkinson.
Yeah.
So you lose
when you do part 2.
Well, that's part 2,
Yeah.
but not in the short term.
Okay, not in the short term, but in.
Correct.
I'm just saying,
There will
if
be
we lock
traffic
that
in
whole
parking.
space up, right, and build this fancy schmancy deal, nobody's going to want to tear that up for parking after they're all done with it. They're not going to want to do that. So, I'm just saying, we should pencil it all in and see what it looks like. And then just, because if let's say we get our way and that we wave our magic wand and we are able to do something in the middle school, what are you going to want to do? You're going to reduce class size, means more teachers,
Correct.
right? So we're going to need more parking there. We're going to need more parking in Atkinson. I'm just saying, let's pencil that all in.
Agreed.
Before the Fields folks lock everything down. And
They're
just-
moving at a very slow pace, I might add as well. On purpose, because there's too many notes that they're in addition to being mindful of all this, they're not rushing to get something done that is going to need to be torn up in 5 seconds.
I guess I just don't want to, I don't want us to find ourselves in the position of feeling like we're going to create a conflict with that group, right? because we spring this thing on, oh, by the way, we need 50 more parking spaces. Did we tell you that? That's all I'm saying. So I'm thinking as we're doing the traffic study, we should try to pencil into the best we can.
I agree.
Just roughly.
And the Fields guys, their initial plans adds a significant number of parking spaces as well. Understanding that the middle school needs them for
And I
chorus.
just want to reiterate, I mean, that's a very legitimate concern. There's no
Yeah,
question about it.
absolutely.
But, you know, I feel very confident that Amy is going to communicate with that group's going to communicate with us. And Kevin, go ahead.
Just a question to Amy. Are there any designers involved yet, or is this, you have some designers for
Yes,
the?
they, I don't know if you've driven around town, but there's a field called McAvoy Field that they just did with us. And they overcame quite a few, things that they had to overcome, concerns, and did a very nice job, and so we're working with them again. They want me to, once we take a vote, to let them know what we chose. If you all aren't opposed, it'd be great if the two of you talked.
No, and may I ask what their names
She'll think of it.
Of course, I'm not going to think of it, but yeah, I can get
are? It's
that
quite
to you.
possible they're already on our team.
Right,
So
right.
as part
I
of the
can't think of it, but I
ECC
can't.
design, we have traffic engineers and we have civil engineers. The civil engineers are responsible typically for the roadways and the curbing and the sidewalks, and the grading for play fields. We have landscape architects that work with us as you further develop the play fields, and we have traffic engineers that work with us. So any of them could be asked to participate to a greater extent than whatever their fee structure was going to be strictly for the ECC. So they're going to be on site, they're going to be studying this. It's not incrementally that much larger for them to be able to do that. And then we'd certainly work with whatever designer was in place. It wouldn't be the first time we came into a project and there were other things going on. And
Right.
by irony, we were already hiring the consultant that was currently working in the community.
And we certainly don't want to pay two people to do the same thing.
No, it wouldn't, no, but that's what I'm
But
saying,
yes.
is it wouldn't be for the same thing, but it would be for those pieces that are not already covered by this designer, the traffic engineer and/or the civil engineer and/or the landscape architect could just look at the playground space and the playfield space and the driveways, so that, as Mr. Teresi is saying, that we make sure we are cognizant of everything that's happening.
And I think it would be helpful for you to send out whoever it is, your traffic engineers or somebody, and take some videos throughout the day of what the traffic looks like. I mean, we have times during the day where traffic on Mass Ave is literally stopped. You cannot go down
Yeah.
the street because of Atkinson drop-off.
Right.
I don't even know how we can do that. I don't know how we can just stop.
And you can't
on
turn
the
off
street.
of 114 onto 125.
Yeah,
for-
it's just
So, I mean,
crazy. So when you look at the current traffic situation with the current configuration, it's nuts to begin with. So I would respectfully submit, somebody ought to go out there, take some videos, and then we should begin looking at them and go like, how is all this?
And if I could add, that's typically one of the first things they do on any project, regardless of it being
Count cars.
independent, on a big site, way off in the corner of the community, it's always one of the first things they do.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kevin. Any other comments? Come on up and introduce yourself. State your address, please.
Hi, I'm Regina Keene. I live at 412 Mass Ave. There was a public hearing held by the state, I believe, I don't know, a couple months ago about the intersection of Mass Ave and 125, which I did not go to and wanted to go to but wasn't able. And I'm just curious if there's some work with the state that can be done regarding the lanes, the turn lanes and whatnot on 125 to help address some of the traffic flow.
Jim Mealy was in a meeting yesterday about
Oh, okay.
that.
I was making eye contact with Selectman DiColigiero.
But Jim was at the meeting yesterday.
Go ahead, Mr. Miller.
Yes, and it's for the intersection and beyond in each direction, but not down that far to that point. It actually ends, they're proposing some sidewalk coming down, and it ends at Beacon Street.
But they were also proposing some turn lanes, weren't they, on,
At the intersections.
right, but they wouldn't go down far enough, you're saying?
No, it's not,
And
the
would they be
project is to
willing
address
to-
the intersection.
To change their plan, or are we like not in
Well, but
timing with their
The
plan?
project is to make that intersection better, right?
Exactly.
I mean, so that intersection will be better.
Right, at least there'll be some turn arrow.
So when you're talking about the impact that maybe the Atkinson traffic has, this would help with that. But not the entrance coming, or the exit coming out of where the ECC is.
Yeah. Also, the exit where you turn, when you're leaving Atkinson during the morning drop-off, Yeah, that road, there could be some work done there. And I know the speed limit sign, for example, for the school is closer to Route 125, so you cannot get out of there because cars immediately just, fly down Mass Ave because they're sick of waiting in the Atkinson traffic. So that could be addressed as part of it too, I would want to raise. But when you guys were talking about the playing fields, I was unsure at various points of the discussion whether you were talking about the middle school fields or the kindergarten playground. So is the thinking that the kindergarten would use the Atkinson playground, or there's some other playground to be placed?
So the question becomes, and that's why I think this is going to take more time than March, is we have to decide, are we going to do something in coordination with the Atkinson? Because as you know, the Atkinson playground is many years off.
Yeah.
To being addressed.
Right.
So do we kind of bundle, and then the ECC is actually after that. Do we bundle that request and try to move it up a little bit in terms of the CPA funding? Do we actually work with the improvement of the Fields Committee and do something collaboratively with them? So there's going to be a lot of conversations. I talked with Mr. Mailer. My thought is to go to one of these fields improvement meetings very quickly to talk about the playground space. It's just going to take some time to decide, is it a joint Atkinson, ECC, kindergarten space decision, obviously making sure that we have appropriate play equipment for kids 1 through 5 and also pre-K through K. Do we think about rolling something into the fields improvement? So we've got to make that decision, and I think there's a lot of players involved in that we want to make sure are heard. You represent the Atkinson PTO. He would be somebody that we would need to be spending a lot of time with but as of right now, I think you're 6 or 7 years out.
Yeah.
So there might be a possibility for a benefit if we work collaboratively to try to address all those needs in a thoughtful way, and the CPA may respond or may not respond favorably to something like that.
Mr. Buckley, want to add something?
One of the good news pieces is that if you were to add playground space for the ECC behind the building where the wetlands currently exist, that's pervious material. There's nothing impacting on the wetlands. And wetlands, you can impact on them to a greater extent with pervious material that allows the water back into the wetland. And if you replicate that portion of the wetland that may be impacted. So obviously a playground is a lot easier to work into that woodsy wetland area out back directly adjacent to the Atkinson playground area than it would be to try to put a building back there.
You read my mind. That was going to be my next question. Could you do that? Other than that, I just want to say I'm very supportive of option 3A. I think it would be great. I have a child in one of the highest classroom counts. I think there's 29 kids in my fourth graders class, so very excited about the idea of reducing the class size. My, I guess, biggest concern would be what comes next regarding the middle school, because obviously my fourth grader will be moving on to the middle school shortly, and I definitely don't want that to be left out. So I'm looking for that for a subsequent phase. And I know a lot of folks I've been talking to are of the same mind, so just wanted to share that.
Thank you, Ms. King.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other people in the audience? Come forward, please.
Hi, excuse me, I'm Kim Siegel, I live at 5 Village Green Drive. I have a couple of concerns, I guess, about the whole plan. I have 2 daughters here in North Andover. One is at Franklin, and we've had a great experience at Franklin. She's in 1st grade. But then I have another daughter who's in preschool, her 1st year, and in 2 years will be going to kindergarten. So I think, is that the year you guys are planning to put this into, the whole plan into action?
That's the hope.
Yep. So.
September 2018 would be the goal, yes.
Okay, so that will probably affect her. So she's 2 more years after this year. So my first concern is, well, my first daughter who went to Franklin for kindergarten, the transition for these kids. Like, to me, I was so happy that my first daughter, Sarah, only had to make one transition from nursery school to kindergarten, and that was it. So the thought of these kids having to do 2 transitions from nursery school to kindergarten, then another transition to another elementary school. So I understand and I appreciate that you guys want to make the schools better for our kids, but to me it's like 2 transitions for such little kids. It seems so hard for them. So that's a concern for me about the transition piece. The other concern is also for my other daughter and both of my daughters and for the other kids in town. You mentioned about redistricting the kids. And I don't know how you would see that impacting. Like, I don't want to have to see my daughter, who is on an IEP, to have to go to another school, and she'll be, if this takes place, in 4th grade. How is that going to impact us? And I want my kids to go to school together. You know, I just think that would be so nice. So are you planning on doing that?
So it's interesting that you brought up both of those issues, because the way to keep a K-5 model in the district is to add on over a bunch of years to a number of the different schools, which would require redistricting. So in some respects, the two issues brought up are actually in competition with one another. So that becomes the challenge. So I'll talk a little bit about transition. Judy Rogers, our K coordinator, is here.
So helpful to me.
Judy's wonderful.
Right.
So, you know, Judy and I met with all of the K, you can come join us if you want, Judy. Judy and I met with all the K teachers over the last week and a half. And obviously their biggest concern, and very thoughtfully, is transition. And
Right, I saw one of my little one who's coming up to have Mrs. Bedoyan, the same one my other one had, and I'm like, oh no, and I want Mr. Clark forever, and I just love Franklin.
Yeah, and you know, so you know, the good thing is that your little one will get him just for one less year if we do this, Mr. Clark and the folks at Franklin. Obviously, as I think Chairman Teresi said, there's no perfect solution here. And so the challenge just becomes, if we want to keep the K-5 model, we would have to redistrict. With the kindergarten model, we were not anticipating any redistricting. So that's kind of how they're in conflict with one another. But obviously the transition is a concern. You know, one thing that mitigates that transition in this model, the 3A model, is actually that for the kids at the ECC, they're transitioning less. I know that may not be the case for your daughter, but there are a number of kids there, so that does, you know, and especially for our kids, you know, some of our most needy kids, especially in terms of their special needs, are at the ECC. So making sure that, especially for those kids, that we're eliminating the number of transitions. We're not increasing their transitions at all. But you know, Judy and I spoke with the kindergarten teachers extensively about transition, so I don't know if, Judy, you just want to quickly talk about that.
Hi, everyone. Judy
You
Rogers,
can pull that closer, Judy.
Okay, is that better?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the transitions are funny with young children. They're very resilient. They do well. Most of our hand-holding is to the mommies and daddies. And I will say the kindergarten team and the preschool team, who I know well as well, are very good at nurturing and helping families get through these transitions. But in the end, the children are fine. So we feel good about that, and it's a change. And anytime there's a change, people you know, feel differently about it, and it takes a little while to get accustomed to it. But we'll work through that, and we'll do some educating and hand-holding and have meetings like we did with the K teachers. They had great questions. They thought of some things that Dr. Price and I hadn't thought of. So it's good to get different people's perspectives when you go through a change process.
Just one other component, Greg Gilligan. So I deal with kindergarten placement when we're oversubscribed, and Judy and I work hand in hand together in the summer. And despite the fact that Judy follows the North Andover census very well, she calls every preschool and daycare within a 10-mile radius outside of North Andover in a circle. We have pressure points. And I think one of the hardest things that is very difficult on me, having a 3rd grader and a 7th grader in our system, is sometimes a school's oversubscribed early, like Franklin was a few years ago, and we had to split up siblings for K. Whereas there was room at some other places, it just happened to be pressure points at a particular school. So there's no perfect solution, but I do know that it would be more of an equitable distribution of kids across with kindergarten, and that's something that I'm anticipating would be.
I mean, one of the advantages of a K complex is that we get to know who the K kids are before we have to assign them to their home school. Right now, it's really tricky if we're not putting the 27th kid in a kindergarten class, even if someone lives within the specific district. And so you get a sense of who are those Ks, and you can start to plan for them. We do our best. Mr. Mealy has census, but trying to predict K enrollment is like the trickiest thing we do. And so at least we would be able to get the K enrollment. Another kid comes into the district for K, we know where they're headed. and we can equitably distribute those classrooms. So there is some kind of advantage about us getting a handle. Once kids get in the district, we're pretty good at predicting what the grade levels are going to be, but it's that first year in the district. So for instance, this year we were 43 kids higher than last year, which resulted in much bigger class sizes than the previous year. And I will tell you, last spring, we were thinking about reducing from 15 to 14 Ks because we didn't have the enrollment at that time to support 15. And we had pressure points in other places. Fourth grade at Atkinson is one example, but we chose not to reduce, and thank goodness we didn't, or we would be in real trouble right now in terms of K. But last spring, around April, we were saying, should we go down to 14 Ks? Because that was what our enrollment was at that time. And Judy, with her incredible knowledge and experience, said, no way, Price, and we didn't. And thank goodness we didn't.
Yeah.
And I would only add, Dr. Rogers, that I saw that resilience in my own children going to the Bradstreet. I mean, they enjoyed the experience thoroughly, but the transition didn't seem to be a stumbling block for them at all. So they had a wonderful experience, and they still comment on that and still think as much of their kindergarten teachers as any other.
Because everyone else is doing it that looks like that.
Exactly.
So that's what, it's a common experience.
It's this wonderful homogeneous environment,
Yes,
right?
it's wonderful.
Yes.
Thank you. The same results.
Thank you. Thank you, Kim.
And you don't think you'll have to redistrict any kids if you do the one big kindergarten complex at the ECC?
Any kids would be unfair for me to say because, as the superintendent has the right to move a street here and there, but I don't anticipate us having. There's no plan, then there's no plan for that. I mean, this is a way to make sure that we give the best flexibility to not have to do that. And actually, we build in spaces in our schools to actually be more of a neighborhood school than we are right now. And there are many places, if you come late to this district, middle of the year, whatever, neighborhood school is often not a reality for you because of our class sizes. So I actually think we'll be more of a neighborhood community 1 through 5 than we currently are right now.
I have a neighbor, we go to Thompson Elementary School, and a neighbor moved in, her sister is also in that district, moved in the wrong time there at Franklin. They're thrilled and happy, but at first we could be walking right there. But
And
we're going
that's-
to Franklin, and that just was by the nature of the numbers.
And Mr. Gilligan does that all the time.
You want to add something?
I was just going to say, one of the things that I hear so much in the community and really am against is the whole redistricting process. And so that is a huge guiding concept of where I will vote and how I will vote on this. I mean, my kids all, have gone to Kittredge or are there currently, and I can't imagine moving them midway through that. I mean, that I think would be more disruptive than everybody moving at the same time, if that makes some sense. But that's one of the things that I just hear over and over again, don't move my school. And people buy homes because they want to be in a specific school or a specific district, whether it's with cousins or, things of that nature. And I think if we're starting to talk about that, then we really lose that piece, which is, I think, pretty great about North Andover.
And I know Judy, and I told her we're looking to buy a home, but I will not move out of Franklin. So I've been stuck there, and I don't want to move Franklin, so
I wouldn't say you're stuck there, you're lucky there.
I'm lucky, exactly. Right, we're going to stay there until, I guess, middle school.
Yeah, and families do that.
Yeah.
You'll see families who have a fifth grader who put their home up for
Right.
Right?
Well, I was redistricted, look at me.
Explains a lot.
Actually, I went for Franklin too, Kittredge. Both great experiences. Thank you, Kim.
Thank you.
Anyone else in the audience want to make a comment or ask a question before we move on? Kathy?
Take out the table. Kathy Koch, 239 Granville Lane. I'm sorry I was late, and just so you all are aware, I have FiOS, and when I checked in on the meeting, it was not being broadcast. Selectman DeColigiero has already checked on that for us, but okay, good. Just so in case anybody brings that up, the first portion of the meeting was not broadcast. My big question, I've looked at it, and I have lots of questions, but one of the big concerns that I have in the proposal that was put forth 2 weeks ago, the discussion was about putting in a playroom and a non-full service cafeteria in the current proposal. And one of my questions, knowing that space needs change in districts over years. And knowing that down the road, we're going to have to be looking at doing something with the middle school, which may or may not have us necessitate shifting some kids around temporarily. I don't know what that looks like. One of the things that I wanted to put out there is that I would hope that if the building up the complex at the ECC, which makes sense, very much makes sense budgetarily for the town, but that a consideration be made to give that a full gymnasium and a full cafeteria space if space allows, so that that building can be used for other grades were it to come to that down the road, and that those kids would have those full services there. And I don't know if there has been any discussion about that or any thought given to that. So that was kind of the big one that I had that I hadn't heard addressed yet.
I can answer this. It's more programmatically from an educational standpoint as it is from an architectural standpoint. So a full-size gymnasium, if this was a freestanding building in a remote area, may make more sense. The fact that the children at that building are not going to use anything more than a good-sized playroom. And the playroom itself would be configured so that it can be divided into multiple teaching stations, and more importantly, be a very nice large meeting area or divided meeting area for outside activities in the evening as well. The fact that the Atkinson is directly adjacent to the building and has a full-size gymnasium, which I think the kids take advantage of now, and granted you don't want to be walking outside in the winter to access the gymnasium, but it's just from an economical standpoint, you wouldn't have two gymnasiums, of full-size gymnasium, because they're so expensive. It's a large piece of the pie. As far as the cafeteria aspect of it, so much is done typically with just warming ovens and other materials, and the kids are staying within their classroom space for eating and not typically going into a full-size cafeteria. Now, the playroom itself could be talked about as a multi-purpose space that could certainly serve some of those needs, but I think that would fall back to the superintendent from a programmatic standpoint versus us suggesting to you that it was necessary to attach those to a building.
Mr. Mealy, how many of our current elementary schools have full kitchens? So Atkinson is the only place that has a full kitchen. The rest of it is this warming approach. And
Warming
this is our
approach.
approach to food services in all of our schools. So that is not as concerning to me. And, I agree with Kevin that the Atkinson gym is right there, and the cost to put a gym is huge.
Okay. What about the idea of, you talked about the playroom space being able to be used for lunch. Having worked in an elementary school where we served the children lunch in their classrooms, that cut substantially into instructional time because of the delivery of the food and the cleanup of the food, and there's something to be said for the children going and experiencing that lunch, but also then you have to have supervision in each of those classrooms
Our current
with
thought
the
is that
food.
play space would double as the cafeteria and play space, and that's something that Dan and I have talked about extensively.
Okay.
Dan is the other applicant.
Right.
Mr. Gross, you want to add?
No, I was just going to say, that did come up 2 weeks ago, and the cost savings now, I think, will limit what we could do with that building as built. It doesn't preclude us from making a decision to, add a gym or, deal with the Kappa Gymnatorium as we've done with other buildings, but it will make that building not automatically capable to be an elementary school.
Did you ask
Okay.
that last
Yeah, I asked that.
It
yeah,
will.
Exactly.
Okay.
So but it's a point well taken.
Okay. Thank you.
And we're lucky that Atkinson used to be the middle school.
Right.
So that's why they have the full gymnasium. Thompson, I think, is just about half gymnasium.
Okay.
If that. And the Franklin's not.
We're not talking about the Franklin
No.
gym. It's just not, Mr. Gilligan.
I guess
It's a non-topic.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Seeing no further public comment? No. Yep. So, Selectman DiColigiero, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for the opportunity. I mean, it's too bad there weren't more members of the public, but I think that's because of the trust that they've put in the five of you and the superintendent and the entire
That's what we tell
team.
ourselves, at least, yeah.
You know what? That's my only guess, because one of the most underappreciated things is how little we talked about money tonight, which is a good thing, not necessarily a bad thing, because the town manager has indicated that one of these options is absolutely feasible without having to discuss any type of override or debt exclusion. And I know that was mentioned, but we had the opportunity yesterday, Chairman Tracy and I, to speak to one of the former senior school committee members who spent about 2 decades on here. And I think that she remains in awe and still pinching herself to think, is this the same community that I worked so long in? Because this is just such a seamless, smooth process. And I just wanted to say once again, thank you to the superintendent for working so closely with our town manager. And I'm grateful for a town manager and a board that has prioritized that. And so I want to just repeat what I had said last time. I hope that extra strong consideration is given to 3A, just precisely because of its affordability. And because, of course, when you entertain seriously thoughts about going to the unaffordable routes, you have to now consider that whole extra piece of how do we pay for it.
Yeah.
Right? So I just want to once again say thank you to everyone for being so open and willing to listen, and not just to the public, but to myself and to suffer my text messages.
And I would say to somebody who oversees the town manager, he's been amazing in this process.
I
Every step of the way.
agree.
It hasn't always been that we've agreed on everything. Mr. Mealy's been there with some of the conversations, but he has been in this. He is committed to trying to help us get class sizes down to the state average, and he is a huge partner. And frankly, we wouldn't even be able to have this conversation without all of the thoughtfulness he's managed this town for the last 5 years.
It's what happens when there's teamwork. There's lightly attended meetings, I guess. So, but thank you.
Thank you. So the one thing I just wanted to add, I think having watched our neighboring communities agonize for decades over projects that we've completed in years, I think that's a mark of what this project really represents to me. It's doing something to really address a need now, not waiting, not trying to gold plate anything. We could have a solution in 2 years that would really help answer the mail here. And to Mr. DeColigero's point, I think one of the big changes in our current town manager has been to consider us as one town, not municipal and schools as 2 separate entities. He considers us a town. So I think that's been a really big help for us.
Very well said. Definitely the appreciation is mutual, Mr. DeColigero. The work that we've done to date has been very rewarding for us. And I think just to reiterate what I said earlier, legitimate concerns about this project remain, but I hope the public and the members here have confidence that we have a lot of smart people working to solve these problems. And I'm pretty confident we're gonna do that. Present company not included, obviously. So with that, just said, Mr. Gross?
Simple question. We did talk a little bit about the money. The budget, that includes the technology, the seats, everything but the teachers, or is that going to be another conversation?
Yeah, so the technology I'm not too worried about. One of the reasons I'm not too worried about that, as we'll do through the budget process, is the MacBook Air leases are coming off. So as it'll work well to have the funds to put the needed technology into that building. And we've gotten that down to under $2,000 or so a classroom. So we're not talking about a huge amount of money, just in terms of the model classrooms we've been putting in. The FF&E is something that Mr. Mealy and I have talked about, the furnitures, fixtures, and equipment. So the quick answer is we have all this furnitures, fixtures, and equipment currently in kindergarten classrooms throughout the district. That may or may not be the right answer, so how much do we have to move, how much do we have to buy? It's one of the things that we're going to have to think about as one-time expenditures. Is that going to be able to be part of the budget or not? These are the conversations that are going to go. We are aware that we may have to bite into the operational for a one-time expenditures for some of that. It probably will be a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and a lot of what North Andover does best, which is making it work.
Thank you.
Is that fair, Mr. Mealy? Okay.
So I want to thank the committee for their indulgence with the change in public comment. I just felt it was important to hear directly from the public and let them have a little time with the architect as well. So if there's any further questions or comments?
You're welcome. Thank you.
Mr. Limpert put a motion on the floor some time ago to adopt option 3A. It was seconded by Mr. Gross. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. The vote's unanimous. Again, thank you. And Kevin, thank you so much
Thank you, Kevin.
for this first part in our journey together.
So,
Okay.
Mr. Chair, given the lightly attended and lightly publicized activities, is it worth trying to reach out to media to at least continue the conversation so people know where we're heading?
So Zoe was in touch with me from the Eagle Tribune. I'm going to text her as soon as the meeting is over. We already have a planned call tomorrow. She'll have an article in the paper this weekend.
Perfect, thank you.
Maybe we can give her one of the schematic of it.
Yeah.
Maybe
She and I
they
are
can publish that.
planning to talk tomorrow.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Good point, though, Mr. Gross. Next item on old business is the second reading and vote on our residency policy. We talked about this a little bit last week, the need for it. 2 weeks ago, I apologize. Are there any further questions, comments on it?
Yeah,
Mr. Gross?
I'm sorry, the only question I had was, there was a request for reference to where our policies fit into Mass General Law.
Yeah, I'll have her do that.
Okay.
Just,
And my very minor question is still sort of formatting it to fit more of ours.
well, this is the policy, so this is what we're going to give to parents. So that's why I think it's in this, this is, I guess we could do that. I
You're
mean,
saying you want to know what part of the book it fits in?
JFAB, I think.
Yeah. And, you know, it's a little bit different style than what our normal policies would look like. It's not a big deal, but.
Okay, so, you know, I do know that Suzanne Egan has, if she hasn't already, has already reached out to you. Ms. Mabley is the chair of the Policies Committee.
Yes.
And you guys were going to meet. So I would ask that maybe as you think about that, that you talk to her about that, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure, fine.
Yeah. Great, because she's new and learning and is excited to do policies with you. And I'm really excited, there's someone excited to do policies with you.
That it's not you.
You said that, Mr. Limper, not me.
Yeah.
But we will take care of that.
Is there a motion from the floor?
I move to approve the policy, the residency policy as presented in the packet.
Second?
Motion made by Mr. McDevitt, seconded by Mr. Limpert. Further discussion?
Obviously with the additions that we just discussed.
Yeah. And this is what we're already doing, basically, and have been doing, is just we're formalizing it.
Yes. We have not been asking people to sign an affidavit, that is a change, but we think that's an important change.
Okay.
And we also, with people who are residing here solely for the purpose of the attendance, like, that's kind of a clarification.
It's a state law, but we haven't necessarily put it in, and
Right.
it's gotten a little tricky for us to interpret that because we don't have a school committee policy
Correct.
on it.
Motion made and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Votes unanimous. Next item of business is second reading and vote on the payroll benefits position that we discussed last week. Any questions for Dr. Price on this item?
Or Mr. Mealy.
Or Mr. Mealy?
I actually, just have a clarification. Assuming that this position starts in January, that's where the financial impact of $29,000 is, right? That's not the yearly, that's a half year.
Half of a year.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. I just want to make sure it was prorated.
Do we sense there'll be any challenges finding a candidate?
We already have a candidate.
Okay.
Yeah.
Imagine that.
Don't want to mess with payroll. The holiday season, that's bad.
Do I hear a motion from the floor to vote for this payroll benefits position?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Limpert, seconded by Mr. McDevitt. All further discussion?
I'm good.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it, 5-0, and another unanimous vote. Okay, FY17 budget status report. Mr. Mealy?
Yes, it continues pretty much as from the last status report. If you look at the spend rate, we're right on with past years and with where we should be at this time of year. The only change really, I had mentioned that the reduction in circuit breaker reimbursement percentage from 72% to 70% meant an additional $100,000 that we would have to come up with. We also had some out-of-district activity That has resulted in additional costs of $65,000. So right now, we're projecting the need of the stabilization fund of $165,000. And if you recall, the stipulation was that the most you could use in 1 year is $250,000 in a 2-year period of $400,000, and we only used the $150,000 last year. So we have $250,000 that we could use if we needed to this year. But right now, it's at $165,000.
And just to be clear, you know, we're working very hard on the out-of-district. The out-of-district increase was actually a family that moved into North Andover where their child was already out of district. So it's not a student going out. I think it's just important because it's something that Dr. Straight's really working on.
Yes.
So this was not a move. This was somebody moved in, they're already in and out of district. That's the way it works.
Inheritance.
Yeah. Can you just clarify something for me? Because I thought I remember in the past that once the school year had started, the district where they started in was responsible till the end of that year. And then...
Getting teed up already, Dr. Strait.
Yeah, I can hear the microphone moving. Yeah.
That's partly true. So there's an April 1st deadline that if you know of a family that you have in your district presently that will be moving prior to April 1st, you need to notify the school district that they will be moving to that this family is coming.
Okay.
And then they are responsible, the receiving school district will then be responsible for any collaborative tuitions or private tuitions and transportations. However, once that April 1st deadline has passed and a family moves out of our district, let's say they're attending a private school, we, as North Andover, will have to continue for that fiscal year being responsible financially for the placement and the transportation costs of that student. If it's a collaborative they're attending, which is a public facility, then the receiving school district would have to pick up the tuition cost. Whether the family moves and informs us after April 1st, we find out in August, we find out in September. So in the case that Dr. Price was referencing, this was indeed a collaborative placed student in a public school. So we had to pick up the full tuition and the full transportation, which increased our oftentimes that can be the case. However, what I'm finding these days with the collaboratives is that the way that they're structuring their tuition, it's not necessarily a significantly cheaper tuition, because some of them are doing more of an a la carte approach, if you will, where you're paying a tuition, and then any additional services the student might need is an added on cost.
Mm-hmm.
And in the case of this student, that's what's occurred.
Okay. And was there any law that changed on this? I don't remember the distinction over co-op and private.
It's been that way
Okay.
as far as I can remember, but
Okay.
that is a distinction.
Yeah, it could have just been the students that happened to come up.
Could be.
You know, were either private or not. But, okay, thank you.
Could be.
Good question, Mr. Devitt, thank you. Any other questions on the budget? Oh, yeah, Mr. Gross, go ahead.
Are we using the central office building differently recently? The reason why I ask is I'm surprised that we're at like 84% of our electricity budget. Are there more meetings, or is there?
Well, there were a lot more when town hall was not open.
Right.
And that just opened. So
Changed,
we were
yeah.
here 5 nights a week as part of the town.
Right. So it was our largesse that was paying for everybody else, right?
Yeah, the only thing that just stuck out is everything seems to be to plan, except for high energy costs of this building. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gross. Okay. Moving on, a second reading and vote for the budget directives. If the members recall correctly, I think we took this up probably about 3 meetings ago, and I believe Mr. Limpert had requested that Dr. Price take another stab at some of these directives. Do you want to touch on this?
Yeah. So I did a little bit of work here. The first was, it's redlined for you in your packets. The first was, our goal is to reduce the percentage of classes K-5 that exceed these class size guidelines from 40% in FY16. Currently, we're at 43.3%, so we went in the wrong direction, I would argue, this year. And then I actually just skipped FY18 because the reality is that so with the goal of actually getting to 10% by FY19. I thought that was a reasonable, without the additional classroom space, it's sort of not so smart to to put a goal in there. So I hope that was an okay compromise.
You were going to fail.
Yeah, so it felt like we wanted something, but I thought this was more realistic.
Yep.
The other thing is, I tried to take the performance-based process to say that we would align the FY18 budget with the strategic objectives and initiatives outlined in the our approved strategic plan, and ensure that the budget aligns with the identified and early indicators of success, the resources needed, and the long-term anticipated outcomes. I thought that aligned well, and was not creating duplication. And then the two about in curriculum materials and technology, I actually just took the direct language from one of our strategic objectives, so that's one of the ones we share together. If you remember, we have two that we share. One was on class size and one was curriculum materials and technology. So those are the changes in an attempt to kind of align with the strategic plan, so that we're not going after two masters here.
Thank you. Mr. Gross, yes?
Yeah, the only recommendation is, I like what you've done with the goal and class size. I would just strike everything other than our goal is to reduce the percentage of K through 5 that exceed class size guidelines to 10% in FY19.
Okay.
Full stop.
Yep, that's fine.
Because, I mean, it's such a volatile number year to year.
Yep.
That'd be my recommendation. Otherwise, the rest really works, and I thank you for being thoughtful and taking the time to help with that.
Everyone okay with that change?
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay, make that change. Any other further questions on these budget directives before we vote on?
Nope.
I don't want to make a motion to accept.
Move to accept the budget directives for FY18.
Second.
As amended by Mr. Gross. Second by Mr. McDevitt. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That's unanimous vote as well. Okay, moving on to new business. The first reading of the 2017-2018 overnight trips to the Dominican Republic and Nicaragua.
So this is the trip you heard so eloquently about last year, where the students went to the Dominican Republic as part of an EF tour, service tour. I said that this was coming a few weeks ago, so that no one was surprised that we were soliciting students who were interested, and here is the 2018. We have not even gone on the 2017 trip, but they're organized.
So is the benefit of this so that they can start to enter in a contract, or?
They save money if they lock it in now. So the idea was that they're already starting to get kids and get deposits, and so they didn't want to do that if we weren't going to approve it.
Okay.
I actually have a daughter who got the word today that she's been approved, should we agree, for the Dominican Republic trip. So there's a small deposit, and then it allows them to plan and also find out if there's enough interest.
Okay.
And I will say it's exciting to have that, if funds aren't available, kids are going to be able to get financial aid through Lilith, so that's a new change.
But they're also doing some private fundraising.
Yeah, they will.
Yes.
They are.
They are.
Got a couple headaches.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you have a motion on this? Oh, that's, this is the first reading.
First reading.
I
Right.
apologize.
And Nicaragua's new this year.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about Nicaragua. Same group, same.
It's same EF. It's the
Same
same
EF.
organization
Okay.
that we've been working with.
Okay, and I assume there's an out clause for things beyond our control, like
Yes.
hurricanes or civil unrest, things of that nature?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
It's interesting,
Brochures
it's,
actually at home, I could have
Well,
brought.
I mean-
I have to say that,
No.
I was just talking to my sister about, Nicaragua has actually one of the safer places in Central America right now. It's interesting. She lived in Costa Rica, and that when she lived there, it wasn't the case, but it's really changed.
Yep, things change quickly.
Yep, which is your point.
That's very good.
Yes.
Okay.
Excellent, thank you.
All right. Moving on. Discussion of the student activities account audit. I assume that's Mr. Maley as well?
So you received a copy of the audit findings, and as I indicated in the cover letter, most of the findings had to do with updating or adding to our school committee policies, tightening up our procedures as they've been outlined, and then ensuring pretty much that all staff and students who are involved in student activity accounts get annual training. So we've put together the plan that you saw to address each one. I ran it by the town treasurer, Lynn Savage, and our accountant, not our accountant, our auditor, Powers and Sullivan is the firm that did it. And they both agreed that it addresses the findings and would work as far as addressing all of the findings.
Any question, Mr. Mealy?
Mr. Mealy, I guess the question that did come to mind when I started looking at this, and this was, I think, really exclusive to the high school because the elementary schools.
No, each school.
Oh, no, I understand, but I mean, there were a sufficient number of accounts.
It's certainly a lot more in the high school.
That in some cases, as identified by the auditors, there was a sort of large amount of retained revenue in the accounts that you would have thought would have been closed. And I assume that's going to be part of this resolution, that will be taken care of.
It is, and that's actually an example of one of those where we did put the policy in place and then just have to make sure that the procedures ensure that it happens at the proper time each year.
That's my comment, is that I'm getting a deja vu here, that we already thought that we had addressed those issues, and to have them come back up and audit again.
Yeah, no, it wasn't. If you remember the last audit, there were very few findings, but they've really redone kind of the standards for student activity accounts, and we anticipated that there would be a lot more findings, and there were. But that one in particular was one that we did put the policy in place for dealing with, and you're talking about class
inactive
account, where a particular class 2012 leaves, and there's a process in place for making sure that the proper handling of those funds is done. So yeah, it's just making sure that it's done when it's supposed to occur each year.
And I know you have made a special effort to try to get everyone out of the cash business. I assume that's all part of this too, to whatever extent is possible, so that we feel like we have a good audit trail for where the money is and where it's going and who has it and all of that.
Yeah, and you're not going to do it completely as much as possible. But even with the checks, we want to make sure that they are deposited within at least no more than 2 days, so we don't have them in our possession for any longer than that. Yep.
Ms. Mably, I think you have some policies that you might need to work on. I know this is.
Well, actually, we'll be drafting them for you, and yeah.
And I don't know if this is at all a good idea, but at my previous high school, if a class had money at the end, they actually gave it to the freshman class coming in.
Right, and that's one of the options, is that they leave it to the freshman class.
It was a nice way to
coming
keep the
in where
money.
they have something to start with.
Yeah, that's what we did, and it was actually a really nice kind of circular. $1,000 is a lot to the freshman class.
Is that a policy that we would adopt, or that they would make that decision each
That's
class?
what the class has to make a decision, and that's one that is made known to them that they can do.
Because they can save it for the reunion if they want.
They could do that as well. It's just they have to take it out, and somebody becomes responsible for it, other than us.
Yeah. Right. Any other questions for Mr. Mealy?
Can we get cashless? I mean, not cashless, but electronic debiting rather than having to handle the paper. Is that possible? Is that a way that we could also clean up our opportunity here?
So we don't, in particular with student activity accounts, there's very little, if any, money. We don't really accept the money. It's the one thing we have are gate receipts, where you can't avoid cash.
So dances, they have it'd be cash if it's $3 at a dance or $5, and there's numbered tickets, so they put mechanisms in place.
Yeah, you saw that in there as well as. Yeah.
Is there ever any list of these clubs or these activities? I can't think of one at an elementary school, but I'm sure there must be. Like, is it like the newspaper club?
You'll be seeing them, yeah. One of the suggestions was to, once I've reviewed it, after it's been presented to me, Lucy McCarthy is the one who oversees this for us. Copies will be coming to the school committee.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Mealy. Okay. The last item is trying to time permitting. Now, considering who's going to present here.
Mr. Neely's going to.
That changes things.
I'm teasing. We'll be looking forward to hearing a little bit about the China trip that Mr. Gilligan and Mr. Mealy undertook back in October.
Feels forever ago, doesn't it, gentlemen?
It does feel like a long time ago. All right, let's see how this works. This is my first attempt
Prezi,
at
yeah.
Prezi, exactly.
I've never used that.
Let's see how it does. So far, not so good.
Yeah, we're not even, can't even get to China.
Yeah.
There they are!
Why don't you ad-lib while Jim's trying to
Yeah.
put this together? It started when you were a young boy, I know.
Just in brief, and Jim's going to go through it, but we had an opportunity to start to develop what we hope is a relationship with a sister school. It's one of the best high schools in a small city of 12 million called Changzhou #1. And just to give you, it's really, they sent 7 students to Peking University, which is the Harvard of China. Harvard lets in 8 out of 100. That school, Peking, has 5 million applications, and they take 1 in 10,000. And this school we're developing a sister partnership with, and we hope to over time, had 7 students admitted to Peking University last year. So it's one of the top schools, and what's pretty awesome about it is, for the most part, 80% of the time, it was like being in North Andover, in the classrooms, the activities, the values, and I'm not going to steal Jim's thunder.
You already did a lot of it. That's okay, it was a good intro. So, Gilly and I, that was our intent, to go over there and be ambassadors and sell North Andover and see what Changzhou #1 was like in those students. And so we presented to the English speaking students, the international students at that school, who do all of their classes in English. This was our team, not just us, but other districts had sent over representatives, mostly superintendents and assistant superintendents. This is at the Great Wall of China. There's Gilly and I in the rickshaw, yep. And there's...
The UN, right?
Exactly. This is a great picture. One of the people we met, an artist, complimented our Mr. Gilligan by telling him that he looked like Richard Nixon.
And Richard Nixon is the most revered president in China.
Open the door.
Yeah, he opened the door.
So we took our trip across this. Actually, we went over the North Pole, didn't we?
Yeah.
So the first idea of getting over there was to build relationships. This was the host family, and Gilly ate half of those dumplings.
Under duress, enforced.
And this is the principal at Changzhou #1, and that's one of the presents that we had brought over with the Rays logo and their logo on the shirt together.
Name of the school?
Changzhou #1.
#1. Yep.
They don't have a school naming policy, they're not going to name after somebody?
What's the enrollment of the school?
2100?
2100. 2000, and then they have 100 in international.
So the way that they number schools is actually #1 means it's the best high school in that town.
Of
So,
20 million people.
So
12 million.
the number attached to it actually really matters.
Okay.
Not like PS1.
And this is 9 through 12, like our school?
It's 10 through 12. So in China, high school is 3 years.
So they introduced us to many people, and so we try to represent ourselves well. This was part of their culture is in a meeting you bring a present.
Absolutely.
And so we brought over that plaque symbolizing yin and yang of our school and their school, and they really appreciated that. And Gilly brought the Rays magnet, and they liked that, and you'll see why in a few minutes. And he also brought some maple syrup, which they had no idea what it was.
Can I do 30 seconds on the maple syrup?
Go ahead.
So we had the T-shirts. Time it. We had the T-shirts that we distributed throughout the high school, students, staff, but we also brought Rays magnets, a couple Rays pins, and a superintendent that may be in the room tonight, I'm not going to mention any names, was at a wedding, and maple syrup, real maple syrup shaped as a leaf, were the the gifts for
favors.
the favors. Thank you. She just happened to, I think, take about 8 to 10 of them from people at her table saying, you really don't need these. Gilly needs these with Jim Mealy. So we brought those over, and what I'd say is the Rays, they loved not only the values, but the tree.
The tree.
I mean, and then I started playing the maple syrup off the tree. It comes from the tree because they don't know what maple syrup is in China. A lot of them thought it was booze, and some of them also thought it was honey. So the interpreter had to explain actually what maple syrup is because they don't have it. They don't get it.
How about pancakes? Are there pancakes?
No.
Pancakes?
There we go.
So I was shaking hands and Gilly was hugging.
The yin and the yang.
He hugged me.
We also had a chance to experience the culture. This was told to us to be the tallest pagoda in the world. We believed them. We went to the top, Gilly.
Yeah. That's Cherry. She was our interpreter, and she's a teacher at the building. She taught 2 years in Little Rock, Arkansas as well.
Art is very important to them. They actually, a renowned artist, prepared this, one for Gilly and one for myself. That was pretty cool. Yeah, they are.
Oh my gosh.
Yep.
Beautiful.
And tea is very important, which we found out, and we had a lesson on how it's prepared, and he poured us all a cup of tea, and then he immediately poured it out, because that was just to cleanse the cup, and the next one was the real one.
So this night, the local TV station came and interviewed me about tea and Jim about art. And last we heard from our friends in China through WeChat, because everything else is blocked, it's up to, on their WeChat, up to 750,000 hits. The show on
We're
Jim.
famous.
Yeah. Not around here, just in Changjiao, number one.
For the record, that's not you going quick.
We can't even find it.
We also got to visit a traditional home along our tour and found out the importance of the courtyard within the home of the Chinese.
Which is?
Well, it's the center of the home. They have courtyards,
Okay.
unlike us. I mean, we have the home and maybe a yard on the front or back.
We have the TV room.
That didn't look like much, but that property was worth $7 million US.
Yeah.
Oh, the house. With the,
Yes.
What did you say?
It was worth $7 million US.
wow.
This was on the Great Wall. It's a very popular spot for wedding photos, which isn't surprising. It probably would be if it was around here too.
Yeah.
And then we got to go to the Forbidden City, and there's the team again.
That's fantastic.
No. The next one, if this would move a little bit quicker. Okay, so then once we got to the school, Gilly and I got to tour the classrooms and could see the focus on learning. And as Gilly was saying, it was just like being in one of our classrooms. The
That
kids
was-
were interacting the same. And,
It's like robotics, right?
That looks like Mike Motherham's classroom
Yeah,
to a
it
T.
is. Yeah. No, exactly.
yep. And other than the slide.
This was English class.
Yeah.
Were they speaking English in this class?
And even though they had 56 kids in a room,
56 kids in every room.
they were able to break up into groups like they did it all the time, and they were really effective in doing so and then reporting out. Yep.
How long were the class days or the school days?
Schools run typically from 7 a.m. till about 8 p.m., but they only take 8 45-minute classes. So it's very typical, it's very actually comparable to the U.S., our day, except in those days there's like a nap built in, there's exercise
Long
built in,
lunch.
there's long lunch built in, there's what they call PE, which is really somewhat like cheerleading built in. So it extends, and actually some of the high schools over there even have housing where people stay on campus.
And they go year-round, or do they also on a 9-month?
No, they have
summers off.
They have summer break.
Yep. And it's just like North Andover High School, they were, the arts are very important, from calligraphy to music. That was a lot of fun. We got to attend this concert, and what they had the students do is tell us about their instrument, give us a quick lesson, and have us try it, and then play something for us, and then the whole group played.
How'd that go?
Well, we were terrible, but they were really good.
And to tell you what great hosts they were, we were at the house eating those dumplings, and the guy wouldn't let me stop eating them. I've never almost felt so full of my life. I almost thought I'd have to have him pull the car over on the ride here. We were an hour and a half late because of the schedule. So those kids waited an hour and a half extra just for us to arrive and then perform.
Gave us the full.
Performance.
Yeah, yeah. And they went easy on me. All I had to do was play We Will Rock You. But they were really proud to show off their instruments. And then what do we bring back with us? So I did hit the button, but yeah. Yeah. Oh. All right, so definitely a sense of how hard they're trying to improve their craft in teaching. These are the teachers in the international program. And they gave us presentations, and it was really exciting to see them talking about Marzano and Bloom's taxonomy and really working to get at the higher level stages of Bloom's taxonomy.
What these folks said is basically, look, our kids are really smart, but they can't work on teams. They're not creative. They have a hard time problem solving. And this is a huge cultural shift for this staff. And we spent time with this. This staff has traveled to the U.S., they've traveled to Australia, New Zealand, and they were really interested in what we had to say about the craft, around teacher collaboration, about what kids should know and be able to do, and how they're going to assess that. And they were particularly had a heavy emphasis on collaboration and group work. Collaboration with teachers, group work with students.
Yep.
And that is a shocking shift. The other thing is, for being such an awesome high school, really progressive, the majority of the leaders of this school, including the principal, are women.
And you can see them here, and this slide just represents that they are anxious to start a partnership and try to work with us as well. And again, just getting together, developing relationships. The feedback we got was extremely positive about North Andover.
Gilly's boundary issues?
They're huggers. Yeah.
Well, you can see them holding hands.
I'll tell you what happened to Jen later.
No. So we went with some skepticism and some doubt, and came away understanding that that their students are the same as our students, and they're trying to improve teaching just as much as we are, and it would be a good partnership. So there are opportunities for partnership. The plaque was well received and was appropriate. There was good synergy between us and Ray's in particular, because when we heard their shared values, these are their values: respect, cooperation, development, achievement. Sound familiar? Almost the same as ours. And so what do we come away thinking will happen? Oh, it didn't work.
I hear something.
Really? I think this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship.
There you go. Well done.
Very well done. Thanks for sharing that. That was really good. I hope the people at home appreciate that as much as we could. Some great photos. It seemed like obviously a great trip. Any questions or comments for the gentleman?
Thanks.
So I'm curious, if that was the best high school in one city, there must be hundreds of high schools like that across China. Right?
They're ranked
more
40.
than that,
Yeah, they're ranked 49th in the nation. And to put that into perspective, just like almost 30% of people breathing on this earth are Chinese. And it's
a lot of people. Okay, we do a public comment. I think we've covered that already. Any? Should have 2 bites of the apple. Any comments from the board?
Thank you.
We're good today.
I think I've already told you what I was going to say about
I
fields.
just had one thing to add. I forgot to say that I should have reiterated what our superintendent learned early on in her stay here in the district, which is who the most important person is. Deb Zagari.
Yes.
I wouldn't have made it here without her.
I have
to give her that shout out for all the wonderful things she's done for me and all the trouble she's kept me out of. Thank you so much.
And we appreciate that as well.
Yes. Just had to add that.
So our next meeting is not till January 5th, I believe.
Yeah.
So I just want to wish the members Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, whatever holiday you celebrate. Enjoy and spend time with your family. So I will now accept the motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Mr. Devitt, Mr. Gross seconded. All in favor say aye. Aye. We are adjourned.
Thank you.